Hey folks, welcome back to Real Estate Investing Unmasked. Today we're going to talk about one of the 11 steps it takes to buy a home. So you're on step one. The first step is decide whether you're ready to buy a home. There are actually quite a few things that need to be done in this step. In my opinion, and in the opinion of experts on credit sesame, the first thing that you should do to know if you're ready to buy a home is to be debt-free. No more debt. Now, I believe that if you can get out of debt before you buy a home, you're going to be so much better off than if you go into buying a home with debt. There's a lot at play when it comes time to get the loan, which we'll talk about in a later step about debt to income. The higher your debt, based on your income, the harder it is to get a lender to approve you for a higher mortgage payment. And if you're looking for a nice house where you think you're going to be there for a while, you're going to want to have something where you can afford whatever it is you're looking for. We all want the best house that's out there, and usually that implies that the price is going to go up. And for that, the less money you pay somebody else per month, the more you can pay for that mortgage. Doesn't mean you want to, it just means you're capable of it, which means you're ready to buy the house. Step number two, you have a high credit score. You've done what it takes to build up that credit score. Now, you do not have to have a credit score in order to get a mortgage. Dave Ramsey teaches all the time that if you have a high enough down payment, you don't need a credit score, which is absolutely true. I have bought many properties without a credit score, and you can do it too. I will tell you that just means you need more down payment, or you need to be more creative when it comes to actually doing the purchasing process. But having a high credit score really does help. It allows it so that you can buy a house with less money down. So how do you get a higher credit score? That's a really good question. And you know what? I will probably create a video just for that. But you know what? Just real quick, you need to have balances that you've had for a long time. Not the balance itself, but credit lines that you've had for a long time. You need to have low debt to income ratios. You need, for whatever you're borrowing, let's say you have a $5,000 limit, that you keep it below a certain point. For instance, if you never borrow more than $1,000 out of that $5,000 limit and you're at 20%, you're probably going to be okay as long as you're always making your payment. If you're borrowing and paying it off quickly, that's going to help your credit score. So all these things, all the buying stuff on credit and paying it on time every month, that's going to be huge. The number of credit lines that you have open, as long as it's not considered too many. I've heard if you have 4 open, 2 that you use, 2 that you don't. The 2 that you do use, you cycle through them very quickly. As far as when you buy something on it, you pay it off quickly. You never go over a certain percentage. So there are certain things to get your credit score higher. We'll talk about that in another video. Number 3 was steady income. You want to make sure that when you're going to buy a house, when you're signing on that dotted line, that you are expecting to have an income that's going to be coming in consistently so that you can make that mortgage payment. It kind of makes sense. You're signing a contract that says you're going to make a payment for 10, 15, even 30 years potentially. And if you're going to be signing that, you want to make sure that the income you have is steady enough, something that you trust, especially when you go through 2008 with the housing market crash, going through COVID, where a lot of people were booted out of their jobs. If you have a recession-proof or depression-proof job, then you're A-okay. If you're in a sales job, well, what kind of sales are you in? Are you in pharmaceutical sales? Well, then you know what? You're probably okay, because people always need those drugs, pharmaceuticals. If you know that you had a recent income increase, or you can see in the future that you're going to get one, then you know what? It's likely that you're A-okay, because if you lock in your price at this much and you know you're going to get an income boost, well, that's just going to make it easier for you to make a payment on this home, and it's going to make it so you're not house poor. So you can lock in the house that you can afford, you get the income increase, and then it's easy to afford that payment. Number 5 is to have a good savings or emergency fund. You know, one of the problems I ran into a long time ago, about 10 years ago, when I was buying real estate left and right, I did not keep an emergency fund, and it was one of the things that killed me later on, and one of the reasons, I think, one of the greatest reasons why I was foreclosed upon with my investment properties. If I had kept an emergency fund, then I probably would have never gone through all the foreclosures I went through, and I went through quite a few. I learned a lot from them, but it's not fun to go through. So having the emergency fund is important. When you have times like this during COVID, when people didn't have even enough toilet paper, for instance, they may not have had any money stockpiled, and it's not your fault that this happened. It's really the government and their reaction to how things happened that caused some of these things to take place. So if you were hit because of COVID, or some of your family or friends were hit because of COVID, and they had an emergency fund, you probably saw that they weren't hit as hard. As an example, my wife and I go through Subscribe and Save with Amazon, and I buy toilet paper about 2 boxes a month. I go every other month, I'll do 2 boxes, sometimes I'll do a 1 box, but I had boxes of toilet paper. So when the toilet paper fiasco hit in early 2020, my family didn't have a problem. We said, okay, hey, you know what? We just won't buy any toilet paper from the store, which we rarely did anyway. Amazon stopped shipping it because they said they had a shortage, but we were fine for months and months until Amazon was able to send us the toilet paper again. So having an emergency fund, having an emergency kit, if you will, being prepared for those times when, hey, there may be something that pops up that you just don't know is going to happen, whether it be health or politics or whatever it may be. You are prepared. Well, in my case with my rental properties, if I had saved $10,000, $15,000 as an emergency fund, well, when I had my 9 out of my 13 tenants leave in the same month, I would have been able to fix up the units and have it rented out. No problem, because I'd had an emergency fund to keep that mortgage payment going while I got everything all rented up again. And I never would have lost the properties. So, or at least I don't think I would have lost the properties. So, if you have an emergency fund, aside from your down payment, you're probably ready to buy a house. Ooh, number 6. Number 6 is to have a healthy down payment. So you don't just need the down payment, you also need enough money for closing costs. And closing costs, I know I'll talk about this later on, but I'll tell you, when you're looking for your down payment, you need to know how much you want to buy, and that will give you an idea of how much money you need to put down. Now, in my case, for my most recent house purchase, I put 5% down. And so on a $400,000 home, that's $20,000. It's just really easy math, 5%. And so I needed it $20,000 plus I needed closing costs. Now, in today, in the 2020 and soon to be 2021, those closing costs, when it's a seller's market, which right now it is, you are probably going to be paying your own closing costs. Unless you happen to be in one of those markets where it's not necessarily seller's market. There's plenty of property out there. And then if that's the case, you can ask for the seller to pay for those closing costs. But if you have to pay for them yourself, expect somewhere between 2 and potentially 3 or 4% of that house price. In my case, I ended up paying about 1.5% in my closing costs. Now, I did some finagling to get those cheaper, and that will be in a future video. So you will want to subscribe to see that. All right, the next one, number 7, is that you don't have any foreseeable large expenditures in the foreseeable future. If you're saving all this money for a down payment, and you have this money set aside for an emergency fund, but you're going to start going to school again, it's not time to buy a house. It just isn't. If you know that you're about to have a huge medical procedure, it's not time to buy a house. Okay? If you know you're about to start a family, I have 5 kids. I know it takes a lot of money to cover the diapers, the crib, the clothes, not just for them, but for the wife that gets pregnant, that gets different clothes also during pregnancy, all the different things that happen. We ended up selling a car to get a truck. And so large expenditures can take place when you're planning a family. So if you're doing that, it's probably not time to buy the house yet. If you're going to be starting a business, not a good time to start buying a house. If you're starting a business, you need the capital available. So you've got an emergency fund, you got a down payment. Well, where's your money going to come from for starting the business? If you got a stockpile of cash for starting the business, a stockpile of cash for buying a house, and a stockpile of cash for emergency fund, you probably got a lot of cash. You're doing okay. But I would still caution you against starting a business and buying a house right before you start a business. You probably want to start the business, get it rolling. You're renting, you're staying somewhere, get the business going, and then buy the house. Once you've seen that you have a steady income, something you can rely upon, or if it brings in enough cash that you can buy a house cash, then it doesn't even matter, right? Number 8 is that you're going to stay put for the foreseeable future. If you're planning on saying, hey, I'm ready for my forever house, then you're good. That's one of the signs that you know you're good. As an example, in the corporate world, if you know you're moving back and forth, going up and down throughout the huge geographical area, it's probably not wise to go ahead and plant your roots now when you're trying to move up in the company. If it's a large company. Now, if it's a smaller company and you want to move up in the company, you probably can place your roots and grow. But let's say, for instance, if you're in a company like Disney or Facebook or some company that has places all over the United States, all over the world even, and you potentially could move from Florida to California to New York to Colorado to Tennessee or any of these places, and you're trying to move up in the company, it probably isn't the time to buy the house. If you're in the military and you know you're bouncing around from base to base and it's going to be less than 3 years between each one, maybe it's not the time to buy the house. Now, if you know you're about to retire in the next 3 years, 4 years potentially, then maybe it's time to put down those roots and buy the house. That may be one of the things that tells you, okay, I'm staying put for a while. That's one of the things to say, I'm ready to buy a house. You got to do some research. If you're looking at what kind of house or what kind of market you're going to be buying in, and you can get an idea of what the payment's going to be, and you know that the mortgage payment you're going to make is not going to make you house poor, then you're probably ready to buy the house. Now, what I mean by that, if let's say that you make $5,000 a month, right? I think that's pretty close to the median income in the United States, probably pretty reasonable. If you make $5,000 a month and your mortgage payment, if you're going to be buying something, say in Boston or something, where it's going to be $4,000 a month, sorry, you're going to be house poor. You probably won't be able to afford the house. Okay, debt to income is going to be way too high. 80% is too high. Okay, now let's say that you can buy a house and it's going to be somewhere in Tennessee or Alabama, and you can buy a house and your payment's going to be $800 a month on a $5,000 a month income. You're not going to be house poor. You're going to be okay. You're going to be less than a 20% debt to income. You're not going to be house poor. That's good, as long as you don't have other debts. It's really hard to live when you're house poor. Now, if you know that you're going to have an income boost coming soon, for instance, you just got out of dental school, you landed your first job, potentially you're planning on being there for a long time, you graduated debt-free. I hope you did. And you're going to a place that you can afford, but it's a little bit tight, but you know you're going to get an income boost here in just a short bit, then maybe you can go ahead and buckle down and get it, and then you'll get that boost potentially. Okay, those are things you have to consider. I don't want to be house poor. I never recommend it, because all it does is breed a lot of arguments. If you're married, it breeds a lot of arguments. You don't want to do that. And if you're all by yourself, you have no one to help you boost your income if you can't build it yourself. So you don't want to be house poor. It's not a good look. And lastly, to decide whether you're ready to buy a house or not, is to know what kind of house you want. The last time when I just bought this house, I asked my wife, I said, what do you need? What do you need in the next house? And one of the things she said is, we need 4 bedrooms. I said, okay. And what else do you need? She said, well, I want my payment to be this amount. I'm like, ooh, that's a low payment. She wanted a really low payment. She didn't want to be house poor. She wanted a really low payment. I said, ooh, that's going to take us out of some of these markets. But knowing she wanted a 4-car garage, I wanted solar panels on the house, I wanted a pool, I wanted a barbecue. A lot of things I wanted, but I knew there were some things that I needed in this house. And, the wife's expectations and my expectations put together, we were able to come up with a list of things that we needed and things that we wanted. And then we were able to go out and start looking for houses. But until you know what you want or what you need, it's not time to look. So you got to kind of figure that out and be introspective. I know it took my wife probably about a month to be able to tell me what it was that she needed or what she wanted, so that I could match those things with houses I was looking for. Those are the 10 things to know whether you're ready to buy a house or not. I didn't come up with the list. I do agree with the list, but I didn't come up with it. So if you want to see where I got that list from, check in the details down below. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up. subscribe because there's going to be a lot more on this. And I'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for watching.